From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what we're working on for you over the next 60 minutes. The wrath of Hurricane Irma showing up on the floor of citrus groves.
We really need to focus on, in all the other parts of the state, agriculture gets lost in the mix.
Why citrus greening is magnifying those losses. Another shock to the market by USDA. Will demand keep up moving forward? Joe Vaclavic and Jim Bauer have answers. Can a farm bill get written in 2017? That's our Farm Journal report. And in John's world,
improving our infrastructure. It won't be easy.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Chevy Silverado. High-strength steel for high-strength dependability.
Now for the news that moved the markets this week. USDA shocking the market again, raising corn, soybean, and cotton production in its September report. But the news didn't keep prices down long, with soybeans and corn trading in the green the next day. USDA projects the national corn yield to hit 169.9 bushels per acre, the third largest corn yield on record. That's 0.4 bushels above the August estimate and 1.7 bushels per acre above the pre-report trade guess. Now, the higher yield forecast also boosting production, with USDA forecasting production to reach 14.2 billion bushels. It's a similar story for soybeans. USDA bumping the yield up to 49.9 bushels per acre, 0.5 bushel increase from last month. And with record soybean acres planted this year, USDA estimates total production to hit a record 4.43 billion bushels, which is higher than the agency's August estimate. Now, ProFarmer's Brian Grady calling this report a repeat of August. And southern farmers also seeing an impressive cotton crop, with USDA forecasting cotton production to reach 21.8 480-pound bales, which is a 6% increase from the August forecast and 27% above last year. However, USDA cautioning that the yield and production impact of the recent hurricanes is still largely unknown and not reflected in the recent report. USDA also noting the agency will need more time to assess how many acres won't be harvested after the damage from the hurricanes, so NASS will release updated harvested acreage info in the October report. Well, impressive ag exports in 2017 is helping the industry break the trend of 2 consecutive years of declining export values. USDA forecasting $139.8 billion in exports for 2017. That's up $10.2 billion from 2016. USDA citing an improved global economy and weaker U.S. dollar. But USDA's initial look at 2018 points to exports falling heading into 2018, with a projected $700 million decline in ag exports next year. Answering the call for cleaner air, China announcing plans to implement more ethanol into its gasoline supply, moving to E10 blends by 2020. The E10 mandate could create a boom for U.S. ethanol, considering China is the world's largest car market and currently ranks number 3 for fuel ethanol consumption. Peter Meyer of S&P Global Platts says this may be one answer to moving corn markets higher down the road.
I think it starts to hit us in 19 because that's when we're going to start to see, if they start to ramp up in 20, we're not going to see it until 19. So we're still going to have to get through the 18 crop year before we start to see it.
Meyer cautions the biggest unknown is China's domestic ethanol production capacity, but he thinks if China looks to the U.S. to help meet demand for the ethanol mandate, he thinks it'll initially be in the form of ethanol, but spilling into corn shipments after that. Hog prices falling to an 11-month low this week. The drop linked to a sharp drop in cash prices. It's no secret the pork industry is dealing with record supplies, but even with 2 new pork processing plants coming online, those packers aren't competing heavily for price.
Agriculture's national forecast is brought to you by Elevo Seed Treatment from Bayer.
All right, those are the headlines. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman joins us now with weather. Mike, remnants of Hurricane Irma finally moving out. Any other hurricanes or tropical storms on your radar right now?
Thanks, Tyne. Well, we're still going to have to watch Jose. It's been kind of meandering in the Atlantic over the past couple of days. East Coast has to at least pay attention to it. Here's the way the drought monitor is showing up. We're seeing drier conditions across most of the middle Mississippi Valley. You can see that from western Indiana westward. Going back 4 weeks, wasn't nearly as much in this area. There were spotty areas in Iowa and northern Missouri, and it was worse in eastern Montana, western North Dakota, but that has actually gotten a little bit better. And we've seen some rain just in the past few days, which will take some more of this away next week once we show the drought monitor once again. So that could be some good news. Let's go day by day this week. We do have a cool front coming through the middle of the country, Ohio Valley, scattered showers and thunderstorms. Now this is still mild air behind it, not nearly as chilly air as we've seen recently. Hot in the southeast, warm, but not as hot as you've seen in the southwestern portions of the country. Now going toward Wednesday, the first system is moving offshore. Again, we're still going to have to watch exactly where Jose is, but high pressure dominating most of the Great Lakes into the mid-Atlantic. Showers and thunderstorms up and down the central plain states with this next system. It's going to be pretty slow to move east. You can see it just moves a little bit by Friday into the western Great Lakes with some scattered showers and thunderstorms. Otherwise, some stationary fronts kind of settling up there. The heat continues in the southern plains, and it's still pretty warm in the east as well. We'll check your longer range forecast coming up in our next half hour.
Thanks, Mike. Well, we showed you the numbers, but what could the latest USDA report mean for prices? Jim Bauer and Joe Vaklovic join me next.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by John Deere. Where can you find the most comprehensive inventory of John Deere certified pre-owned tractors, combines, and sprayers? MachineFinder.com. Sometimes the best new addition to your fleet isn't new.
All right, here now with Jim Bauer and Joe Vaklovic. We had these big USDA reports this week. I mentioned it earlier in the show. Increased production and yield on corn and soybeans. Looking at increased production on cotton. I mean, raising the yield wasn't largely expected, but we did see prices fall as much as I would have thought, Jim.
Well, I'm still having a little bit of difficulty figuring out how you can raise the bean yield and then a couple of bushel per acre and then drop the corn yield a couple of bushel on the same farm, same location, same state, same time of year. So the market will figure that out. But the big thing that I think is going to happen here now over the next several months to 6 months out is low prices cure low prices, high prices cure high prices. And I think the lowering of the price level that we've seen even from last year is creating a much more broader demand base worldwide. And I'm a little bit encouraged by the market action since that report came out.
Yeah, and demand is something we need to talk about. But looking just at this report, do you think that the trade believes these numbers?
Sure they do. They usually take the USDA numbers at face value. I think the trade is becoming pretty comfortable with the idea that we've at least got corn and soybean yields that are near trend line. And when that's the case, this is a bad time of year. I mean, seasonally, we're following pretty normal pattern, really. Mm-hmm. We had a summer rally. We've seen deterioration now through August, into September, into harvest. This is all very normal. This is a story that we've seen before. And for the moment, I'm just going to go with the idea that USDA is right, and the markets are going to try to carve out some kind of bottom here.
So can you read into it too much, though, that we had these big numbers, these big production yield numbers come out, and then yet we still managed to trade in the green a couple days after that? I mean, can we read into that or not?
No, I don't think so. I think that the corn market's sitting less than 10 cents away from contract lows, so I don't think we're out of the woods yet. I hope we are, but the seasonals and the supply and demand and a lot of things tell me that we haven't steered clear of lower prices yet, I don't think.
So you don't think we've put a bottom in yet?
I think it's very possible that we could leak lower, especially once we get into harvest in the heart of the corn belt. We haven't really got there yet.
Do you think that we've put a bottom in this market, Jim?
Well, it's a difficult question because there's a lot happening, but I think in general, from what I'm picking up, and I'm going to represent Bauer Trading's opinion, and we've always had a policy not to look at the USDA reports too closely or the pro farmer tours too closely, although I think they do a good job. But we try to read what comes directly off the combine. That combine tells a story real quick, real fast. And so far, at least from what I can tell, based upon listening to people and talking to customers, it looks to me like if you go to Springfield, Illinois, and moving south towards the area that's being harvested right now more aggressively, we're hearing yields on soybeans around 7 to 11 bushels per acre below what they had last year. Now remember, last year was a record, but it seems to me some of these bean fields aren't kicking out quite the yield that producer had expected. So again, we're going to enter a time frame here over the next 2 or 3 weeks where those digital readouts on every single combine in America is going to be kicking out what that yield is. We want to look at the yield directly off the combine before we say yes or no as far as up or down.
And see, I've heard in southern Illinois like 80 bushel per acre beans. It's amazing yields down there. So I know
there are pockets. Now,
Okay.
there are pockets of very high that got rain, but there's also pockets where it was very, some of those people a county away may have had almost nothing for yield.
Right.
So again, it's a question mark, and we're going to see what that digital readout says.
Very variable, very much so. In the report, pod counts versus pod weights. You know, I heard some discrepancies and some arguments about the numbers that USDA put out in the latest report regarding that. Initially, what do you think?
There's a chance that USDA's number's too high. There's a chance that USDA's number's too low. I'm not gonna change my opinion or the way I navigate the markets based on what I think about the yield. Everyone's got an opinion, and in a year like this when you've got low prices and you've certainly got variability, there's gonna be a lot of people that don't want to agree with the big number, and maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. I'm not in a position to say either way, I don't think.
All right, well, we need to take a short break, but China had a big announcement. We mentioned it earlier in the show about E10 blends and an ethanol mandate. So could that give life to the market short term? Is it more long term? And what would it take short term to get prices to bump up a little bit? We'll ask both Joe and Jim when we come back on U.S. Farm Report.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by the Liberty Link system, the simply better solution for a stronger yield and superior weed control from Bayer.
Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. Well, big news out of China this week. It looks like we could see an ethanol mandate with China moving to E10 blends in their ethanol. Now, it doesn't look like that's the goal, kind of is 2020. So in your mind, Jim, how big of a deal is it to the markets today?
Well, I was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming here about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and I noticed the large number of tourists there, the high percentage of people from China. And of course, that's a pristine location in America, and they see how clean things are and how pristine things can be if you manage it correctly. Those people all go back to China with their families, and they think back how nice it was here, and they look at the smog, the pollution, the carbon emissions, the dirtiness of air pollution. And so there's a major move on now inside China to go more towards electric cars and more towards ethanol production and usage. Right now they've got about 10 plants being under construction in the northeast quadrant. They'll be online here relatively soon, and there's talk they may go as high as another 35 plants on board by the year 2020, which that sounds like a long ways away, but with that kind of production, it tells me that they value an opportunity to make use of corn surpluses and try to basically formulate it to something that helps the country.
Right. But do you think they're going to come to the U.S. to meet some of those needs? I mean, whether it be actual corn shipments or ethanol shipments, Joe, how do you think this impacts us?
Long term, it's very good. It's very positive. It's very constructive for corn demand. What are the balance sheets worldwide going to look like 3 or 4 years from now? I'm not sure, so I don't know exactly what this means for the U.S., but on a global basis, just for corn demand in general, I mean, it's an obvious positive. Short term, it's probably not going to do a whole lot to help us.
But it sounds like, Jim, we need something like this. I mean, we've talked about what is it going to take to move corn prices higher? Well, it's going to be increased demand as we continue to prove that we can produce some impressive yields here in the U.S. So is it something like this that long-term then is really going to be the answer to our oversupply here in the U.S.?
Well, I guess it's your definition of what's long-term. That's kind of a hard thing to analyze as far as a trader because things move so fast in our world. But again, I think it's a positive thing. It can help to be because you're using up global surplus, and that's the American farmers and farmers worldwide have become very efficient. You know, here at Bauer Trading, we have very few clients anymore who aren't that way. Now, 15, 20 years ago, some of them weren't that good at marketers, but we really don't have any bad marketers now in our portfolios because they become so efficient. So it's just another form of efficiency, but it's going to another part of the world, and it's going to. I think it's got to be good long term for us.
Okay, long term, but short term, when we look at the current supply situation, we look at the current carryover, I mean, we've got a lot of stocks out there. So what is it going to take to move prices higher more short term? let's say kind of past harvest?
Very short term, your best bet is that the yields are light and that USDA is wrong on the numbers. And I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm saying that's your best bet for a much different, higher market. I mean, I think you can expect some sort of post-harvest event. That's usually the case. You know, once we flush out some cash grain into the system at low prices, that's when you get your chance to rally, you know, after October 1st. So I think there's limited upside potential for that sort of event. And if the yields are light, then it could be a game changer, but I'm not ready to say that.
You agree?
Well, I'm watching wheat. You know, wheat's kind of a forgotten market in a certain sense, but you know, wheat, there's some things happening now. The market accepted that guy, I would call it a negative report. It accepted that, it started to perform better, but we've got major problems with drought and heat in Australia, major problem. We got major problems in Argentina with too much water, and now Brazil's too dry. So I think down the road, wheat might be the sleeper in the whole marketplace.
Who would have thought that we would change the tune and talk about wheat being the sleeper of the market? But lean hog contracts, switching gears, saw lean hog contracts hit an 11-month low. We know we are facing this oversupply situation. Do you see that changing anytime soon?
No, it doesn't look that way. It looks pretty bad. We had kind of a reversal at the end of August. And a lot of times seasonally, you'll see a rally after that late August timeframe, and it looked like that was the case. And now we've given back that rally very quickly, so we're not out of the woods there yet.
All right. Well, we need to take a short break, but we're going to get their closing thoughts. We'll do that when we come back on U.S. Farm Report. All right. Time now to get their closing thoughts. Jim, we'll start with you.
This has been a very unusual year, and we're going to have to accept the fact that you can be right one minute and dead wrong the next minute. It's been that kind of market. A lot of it has to do with the USDA reports, you know, being so much higher in yield than what the trade expected. So as we said earlier in the program, the market's going to figure out real quick here now in the next 2 to 3 weeks whether that yield is there or not. So my feeling is pay very close attention to that and make your marketing decision based upon that.
Okay, Joe?
I will respectfully disagree, and I'll say that this has been very normal in that we put in a summer high. We figured out that the crop's bigger than what we thought. We've seen this story many, many times before. Big crops get bigger. That's what we saw from USDA in September. So just remember that this is supposed to be a bad time of year in regard to price historically. Hopefully light at the end of the tunnel with some kind of post-harvest event.
All right, thank you both for being here. We appreciate it. Let's take a break, and John Phipps joins us next. As infrastructure crumbles across the countryside, why does it take so long to fix it? Here's John Phipps.
Last month, the Missouri Public Service Commission denied permission for the construction of a major new power transmission line across the state. Although most of the commissioners actually approved of the project, a recent court ruling declared the builders had to get permission county by county as well, which it did not have. Now, what happens next is unclear. Power line fights have always been hyper-local. Most of us really don't care if there's one built even next door to us as long as it's not really in our field. Giving final say to local government is usually the kiss of death to such projects. In fact, the long-debated Keystone XL pipeline is hung up with similar court cases. There is a good chance that delay has been kind of helpful since the fracking boom has largely eliminated the demand for Canadian tar sands oil, greatly reducing the need for the pipeline. Regardless of your position on such public projects and how government should regulate them, these lengthy disputes suggest one good reason why our much lamented infrastructure is so slow and expensive to improve. It is also a wake-up call to the idea that places that have a lot of wind and solar energy, but little demand, like Kansas or Wyoming or Oklahoma, that they can realize the full profit potential of wind and solar farms. The power is needed on the coast, not the Great Plains. And there are a lot of stubborn people between those two places. The same hassles plague roads and airports and other projects. Changes to the landscape will impact people who won't like it a bit. And our legal system gives them considerable power to resist. For our power grid, this stumbling block to progress makes me lean toward a more distributed system. This means solar roofs and batteries in the garage rather than acres of solar panels in the desert or more wind farms on the plains. While less efficient, such small standalone installations don't require much of any cooperation. Planning our national future, then, needs to take into account our individual visions of that future are not widely shared, and the needed cooperation will be slow in arriving. More and more, it looks to me like we are all in this alone.
Thanks, John. Well, still to come, hurricanes ripping away harvest-ready crops. So just how bad is the damage in the citrus belt? We have the numbers after the break.
U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast. From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. This weekend, we have much more ahead. It's a citrus catastrophe as Florida growers feel the wrath of Hurricane Irma. Finessing a farm bill is a major task for legislators, but can it get finished in 2017? We're on the road talking tillage trends in Minnesota, and in customer support, John helps us navigate NAFTA. Now for the headlines, the citrus belt in Florida feeling the punches from Hurricane Irma, with farm families now facing weeks of rebuilding, repairing, and replanting. Informal estimates put total ag losses in the billions. Florida Senators Bill Nelson and Marco Rubio assessing the damage in the citrus belt with boots on the ground in devastated orange groves this week. Look at the pictures of the devastation in those groves with near harvest ready fruit ripped from trees. Early estimates point to 60% of green fruit was knocked off citrus trees in southwest Florida. Losses magnified in the state by already drastic production cuts from citrus greening.
Devastating hurricane, and we've lost the majority of this year's crop. But compared to 10 years of HLB, that really has taken your production, your crops, your grower returns.
We've been cut in half on a production level because of disease. This cuts that half in half.
Florida's farmers and ranchers working to restore production without power and roads unnavigable. Another issue is standing water, not only in groves, but cattle ranches.
And then there's always the danger that in the mix of all the disaster and catastrophic loss that we're seeing in the Keys, which we really need to focus on, and all the other parts of the state, agriculture gets lost in the mix.
Florida ranks second in the U.S. for the value of vegetable production. Farm Bureau says farmers who already planted fall vegetables, including tomatoes, are facing a near total loss. USDA announcing special procedures for farmers and ranchers in both Hurricane Irma and Harvey's path. They're giving them extra time to report damage. U.S. milk processors will need an additional 27 billion pounds of capacity over the next decade to keep up with current supply trends. CoBank says processors simply don't have the capacity to keep up with production gains. Each year, U.S. dairy farmers produce 3 billion more pounds of milk than the year before, and production growth is outpacing processing capacity. All right, that's it for the news. Meteorologist Mike Kaufman has a longer range look at the weather. Mike, talks of La Nina entering into the weather conversation right now, but with a 55 to 60% chance. What does that even mean?
Tyne, it basically means most computer models are showing a La Nina coming on and others not quite so much. Now, if that does happen, we're kind of thinking cooler in the northern plains and warmer in the southeast. But again, that's a long way off before we start looking at winter. Look at the jet stream right now, and a total flip-flop from what we've seen for most of August and early September. Instead of the ridge out west and the trough in the east, we're going backwards, which means the heat in the east and the cooler weather out in the western portions of the country. And that continues right through this weekend, as you can see. So we're kind of settling in for the long term. Temperatures over the next 30 days, I'm going above normal for the Great Lakes, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, near normal, which is still warm for the Southeast, below normal for the Central and Northern Rockies. And then you can see, as far as the 30-day outlook for precipitation is concerned, above normal in the Northern Plains and Montana. That's good news there. Above normal Mid-Atlantic and the Southeast, only below normal area, West Texas into northern Mexico. Tyne?
Thanks, Mike. Well, as Congress pushes through its fall schedule, the ag industry is watching closely to see if several major agenda items make their way to the floor. That includes a new farm bill. Clinton Griffiths spoke with ag leaders about the farm bill and the possibility of it getting done this fall.
Well, I grew up in West Texas. I'm eternally optimistic, just by nature. So, yes, either late this year, early next year has been the timeline.
Chairman of the House Ag Committee, Mike Conaway, taking time to listen to farmers at the 2017 Farm Progress Show. He and other members prepping for a return to Washington and what could be a busy fall, one that includes a farm bill.
So either one of those, I think we'll have floor time. Once the leader's able to show, say, all right, Conaway, you can have these days on the floor, I'll back up from that by about 10 days, get it through committee, and then we'll move forward.
I think we can get it done this year. It's going to be up to the leadership whether they're going to give us floor time. But I think the way this thing is going, I think they're going to have no accomplishments, coming towards the end of the year, and they might see the farm bill as a way to have a win.
Ag leaders are hoping to see that happen.
Let's keep it out of the 2018 midterm election cycle. Let's do it now. Let's get it done. Let's get farmers so they know what to expect.
Support for that timeline also coming from down the mall.
The farm bill made a lot of progress. There are a few sectors that didn't fare as well. Dairy was one. We see that in Wisconsin and other places in the upper Midwest. Cotton is another. And the Stacks program, the insurance program in cotton did very well. They came out of Title I, which was in the farm program. And I think those are two areas we'll have to look at. Specialty crops and organic is another thing that's growing sector that we're going to probably have to pay more attention to that.
The two main ticket items are cotton and dairy have got to get done in this farm bill, and Colin and I are going to work together to make that happen.
And the costs of these programs are starting to roll out.
I think at the outside, what needs to be done can be done for $150 million over 10 years. So that's only $15 million a year. So I think we can do it.
On the crop insurance side, a recent GAO report saying the actual rate of return for the companies from 2009 to 2015 averaged 16%.
The one consistent theme we heard through all five is don't screw up crop insurance. In fact, just don't screw it up. If crop insurance was as lucrative as GAO said it is, the market would be flooded with insurance companies trying to elbow their way into it. Just the opposite is the case. We've got insurance company after insurance company fleeing the market because they can't make the kind of return on investment that they have to make.
Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue says it will be looked at.
I think we're going to look at the facts on that. I don't think it's a threat. We let commerce do. There are plenty of bidders in that arena, and I think if we're looking at an 18% return on investment, that's probably too much in a regulated environment. We'll look at the numbers and see what that is. It was negotiated. That will be part of the farm bill of what that return ought to be in that area. There are very few industries that make an 18% return on investment today.
Despite the challenges, leaders say there is resolve to get the work finished.
Both the leader and the speaker are very supportive of getting a farm bill done.
Now, the Farm Bill will have a tough time squeezing into a busy agenda this fall, from tax reform to immigration, budgets, spending, and now possibly a fresh run at health care. Lawmakers say finding time to get on floor may be a bigger challenge than passing the Farm Bill. All right, next up, John Phipps.
Unlock the power of ag technology this December in Indianapolis at the first ever Ag Tech Expo. Learn all about it at farmjournalagtech.com.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by QLF. For 40 years, QLF has been proud to support American farmers that feed the world.
As leaders continue to work through negotiating NAFTA, the trade pact more than 20 years old, drawing scrutiny and praise. So really, what's at stake? John Phipps helps us navigate NAFTA and customer support.
I've been waiting to respond to this email in order to get some idea how things could possibly work out. So, what about NAFTA? Can we have a lucid conversation about that now that it's on the table? And that's from Leo Legarreta in Ponce, Illinois. NAFTA is much on the minds of farmers these days, but this topic will need a full ag-splainer. Tyne has been doing an excellent job of providing background information and breaking news regarding NAFTA negotiations. I'll try to break down the issues and possible outcomes. Broadly speaking, grain and livestock farmers benefited quite a bit from increased export opportunities as NAFTA took effect. Produce growers, such as tomato producers in Florida especially, not so much. Overall, the ag sector has a lot to lose, however, should talks fail or NAFTA is abandoned. Now, let's look at what seems to be the biggest issues targeted for revision or renegotiation. And the first of those are the rules of origin. Goods trade freely in North America. 62.5% of the content originates there. With more components being sourced, like for cars, from Asia, there is pressure from the U.S. to raise this number. Government procurement New rules would allow U.S. companies to bid more easily for Mexican and Canadian contracts, and vice versa. Dispute resolution. How do you settle the inevitable claims of violations of the rules? Under NAFTA, independent boards decide both subsidy and dumping complaints and disputes between governments and foreign investors. In both of these areas, NAFTA critics will claim this is a loss of national sovereignty by submitting to outside authorities. Supply management. Two targets here are the Canadian Dairy Program and the U.S. Sugar Program. Now, I count the rest of the issues as somewhat lesser. Currency manipulation is often mentioned, but there's little evidence that it exists in North America. Labor rules will get entangled with U.S. immigration and right-to-work laws. And the U.S. has griped about Canadian softwood lumber trade and Canadian liquor laws for decades, along with how much stuff cross-border shoppers can bring in duty-free. Okay, those are some things to watch. Next week, I'll talk about what could go right and wrong in the talks.
Thanks, John. Well, as new and used iron continues to see pressured prices, some sectors are seeing sales actually skyrocket. So what's Machinery Pete seeing? We're on the road with Machinery Pete to basically his backyard in Northfield, Minnesota, next.
On the Road with Machinery Pete is brought to you by John Deere. Nothing runs like a deer.
Well, after a sluggish story in sales of four-wheel drive tractors, the latest Association of Equipment Manufacturers flash report showing a comeback with sales of four-wheel drive equipment up 66% in August. So what's performing the best on the books of Machinery Pete? We're on the road this week to SEMA Equipment in Northfield, Minnesota.
A lot of pods, Tyler.
Planted in southern Minnesota, Doug Felton is looking at a good crop, but one he doesn't think will reach a record.
This year has been a little more of a challenge. We've had spotty rains and it was cold and wet up here early.
Felton knows there's no such thing as a perfect year, but 2016 wasn't too far off.
The best part about 16 was whether it was light ground or heavy ground or whatever, it all was good. If you didn't get 200 bushel corn, there was something wrong.
I'd say last year was probably our best year.
Yields may not hit last year's levels, but with a good crop, additional machines are needed in the field each year.
We needed another tractor in the spring. A lot of times we were short one, so I just bought another one and upgraded that.
Generally, I'm a second buyer on machinery. We're large enough to have one good, complete line of machinery, but if I can have somebody take the top off of a combine, which I did last year, or the top off of a tractor, which I did last year. There were some opportunities.
Most equipment dealers aren't seeing the same demand for iron they did 5 years ago, but SEMA in southern Minnesota says the record yields last fall spilled over into 2017, ultimately driving some decisions.
In the past, we've always worked with customers that have traded, every year or every 2 years, and if we had their trade 12 months later and they were asking for another new price, it was like, well, we still got your one from last year. So we've asked our customers for some help because we've needed to restructure how we do certain deals.
But in order to find a more healthy level in used equipment, SEMA took a creative approach, hosting an auction.
25 now, 20,000. Overall, numbers came in better than projected, so it was definitely a successful auction in our eyes.
Machinery Pete says that auction flagged some impressive prices on his end.
I think folks the last 12 to 18 months have been cognizant of the opportunity in front of them to upgrade into late model used.
Machinery Pete's trends indicate searches for high horsepower tractors top in November, December, and March.
So if you flip that, you'd say, well, when could I maybe get better value? And I would, be looking maybe in the summer months or early fall. And I think there's opportunity to get some good value there.
He says a farmer in the market to buy can find the best deal on planters today, but the sector with the most momentum looks to be lower horsepower equipment.
Dealer we were interviewing was talking about, gosh, we just can't keep them in. And I see the exact same thing at auction, whatever color, if it's under 100 horse in good shape, if it's 1 year old, if it's 25 years old, that stuff is kind of red hot.
As harvest nears, Machinery Pete is also watching tillage trends. Small use tillage equipment has been strong, whereas larger tillage equipment like 40 or 60 foot sales have been challenging.
So if you're looking at buying a 60-foot field cultivator and you're wondering, gosh, values have been dropping, what I've been seeing is those values starting to hold. So again, if that can push you off the sidelines, That's just what I've been seeing, the used value stabilizing.
In Minnesota, SEMA's also seen growing demand for fall tillage with more interest in minimal till.
Timeliness and acres per hour, so you're able to cover the ground really fast and efficiently. You have less cost per acre because you're not deep tilling it, and it does a good job of sizing crop and getting ready for the spring.
It's loosening the ground up so we get better water penetration.
As Conrad moves to more minimal tillage, the 2100 minimal till ripper is his go-to tool.
It's lowered our use of the disc ripper a lot.
Moving to a 4-year rotation with it.
And then where we're doing the cover crop stuff and leaving the corn stalks for beans now, we do the headlands with this into the corn stalks and stuff.
Whether it's in the field or in the cab, technology is helping Conrad implement better conservation practices.
The first year you want to take it out of the cab, throw it on the ground, and drive over it. The second year, you're getting accustomed to it. It's pretty neat. The third year, you won't farm without it.
And it's laying the groundwork for a sustainable operation that's in focus no matter where commodity prices set today.
I feel we're going to get a decent crop. I just don't really know what's going to be handed to us. We'd like a better commodity price, but I've been in this so long now, we always seem to figure out a way to survive.
And next month, our travels with Machinery Pete take us to Olathe, Kansas. Well, when we come back, Machinery Pete rejoins us for Tractor Tales.
Tractor Tales is brought to you by John Deere. Where can you find the most comprehensive inventory of John Deere certified pre-owned tractors, combines, and sprayers? MachineFinder.com. Sometimes the best new addition to your fleet isn't new.
Welcome back to Tractor Tales, folks. This week we're going to head to Northern Illinois to check out a John Deere 730. Gail Goodell started collecting tractors with this classic diesel, and although he's not fond of the way it rides, he's been driving it in parades ever since he purchased it.
I'm standing here by a 730. It's a 1958 model. I bought it from a neighbor, and he had 2 of them, and I bought this one. This was my introduction into collecting tractors. He was wanting to buy a house, and he needed some money. So I said, I'll just buy that tractor from you. And that was enough to get him. I got a tractor, and he got a house. He had done some of the mechanical work on it, and I did some more on it, and then had it painted, and it went on a lot of tractor rides before I had a whole lot of tractors to choose from. It's still a very nice old tractor. It's an electric start, runs nice. I like it a lot. I keep it around here because I think everybody ought to have a 730 John Deere tractor. They're very, very popular. The last era of the 2 cylinders, and this is a good one. It's really sound and tight. I just like it. Somehow I like the sound of a 2-cylinder tractor. But the fuel economy is astounding. You can just, I tell my people with other brands of tractors every so often I have to take fuel out of the tractor because it's that good. Yeah. I've been into the transmission and moved some gears around to get new faces on some of the gears. So I quieted it down quite a bit on the gear lash. So I did do that. Otherwise, I've done nothing to the injection pump. Looks like I could do a little better job of cleaning it, but it's a popular tractor when I take it on tractor rides. Whenever there's anybody extra, they like to take this one, and I like to let them too. It's a nice parade tractor. Sounds nice in a parade.
Well, today's Country Church Salute goes to the Trenton Baptist Church in Trenton, Kentucky. In 2010, the congregation celebrated its 150th anniversary. The Brookshire family tells us the church is still active, growing and vital church in the city of Trenton. Thanks for sending that in. And if you have a home church salute you would like to send in, you can do that to the address on the screen. Stay with us. We have From the Farm photos next.
This is Machinery Pete, inviting you to check out my new website, machinerypete.com. Offering farmers tens of thousands of used equipment listings to search, let Machinery Pete help you find and value your next piece of used equipment.
Welcome back. Well, Mike, we focused a lot on the show about the severe hurricane and the impact, but our friends in the Northwest are dealing with another extreme wildfire. Jerome Stenberg has J-Bar Stenberg Ranch in Montana Look at these stark images. He says not only are they seeing severe drought, Mike,
Ugh.
but forest fires are burning homes, farms, and ranches, forcing mass evacuations in Missoula. He says 750,000 acres are in uncontrolled fire, and that continues to grow. Even this summer, they were attending their county fair, Mike, when it was ended abruptly because people were notified they need to get home and evacuate. Their only hope right now is some rain and snow to help put these wildfires out, and they did get some rain.
And Rachel grabbed these images of a fire east of Livingston, Montana. The blacktail fire ballooned to 5,000 acres midweek. Firefighters and the community working to control the flames, filling up water and applying it aerially with a helicopter. Thankfully, rain calmed the flames, but as you can see, acres of land severely scarred.
So sad.
And for all of us at U.S. Farm Report, I'm Mike Hoffman.
And I'm Tyne Morgan. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to join us again right here next week as we work to build on our tradition. Have a great weekend, everyone.
U.S. Farm Report, America's longest-lasting news program for farmers, is powered by Ram Trucks, America's longest-lasting pickups. U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.